is logged on, and good to see some of our Leadership Delaware faces again. In Leadership Delaware fashion, we're going to start right on time. It's 12 o'clock, and we're going to get started with our lunch education. So just a couple things as we get started, kind of roll right into our presentation. I'm extremely excited about this one. This is our, as we're working through our leadership beyond COVID-19, we've all been impacted by COVID-19 in some fashion, either impacted, infected, or affected by COVID-19 in some fashion. So we are always looking for an opportunity to learn through this crisis because it is definitely unique. So as we get on, we're going to be starting with our session 3, which is restoring mental health and leadership, which is extremely, extremely important. And it is my honor and pleasure to introduce Malia Boone. And she is currently the Crisis Service Manager for Delaware Guidance Services, which is an amazing organization and nonprofit that's right in the state of Delaware. A little bit about Malia is she has 18 years in the field, and of those 18 years, she's been in the leadership role since 2011. In her leadership role, as you can imagine, Delaware Guidance Services provides mental health services for children. She's been primarily involved in the crisis section of that, and she leads leaders. So these are the folks who are in crisis that manage people who are in crisis. So her experience in this field is just, you can't even find a better resource here. So just a little bit about her background. Malia has her bachelor's degree from the University of Delaware in psychology, and she received her master's degree from Wilmington, Delaware, and that was in community health. So she's very experienced and appropriate for this subject. So as we go forward, we just want to keep in mind a couple things is that, as she was, leading her team, she's teaching flexibility. She's also teaching the strength-based resilience. And more importantly, she's teaching self-care and leading through it. I love, one of my favorite quotes is you can't pour from an empty cup. So we're hoping Malia is able to bring a little knowledge and teach us how to fill our cup. Malia.
Yes. Thank you, Joel. Thank you, Joel. So I'm just going to go right in. And I wanted to start off by kind of giving you guys something to think about in terms of the mental health impact of COVID-19. In April, there was a tracking poll done by Kaiser Family Foundation, and they found that almost half, 45% of adults that were polled were reporting that stress and worry about coronavirus was impacting their mental health. So that's a huge percentage of our population that's really feeling impacted. And as leaders and people who are guiding those who are doing the work in our organizations, we know that there are people that are impacted by this, and many of us are impacted as well. Some of the things that they found in their tracking poll was that isolation, having, the states shut down and things like that, not being able to see their family and friends, and also job loss was leading to a lot of depression and anxiety. Also, people are feeling increased anxiety around just the uncertainty of everything, not knowing what's going to happen in the future, and then some fear about whether or not they may be sick, that themselves or their loved ones may become ill or even die. So there are a lot of, on top of already mental health impacts of normal life, there are other things that are going on that are specific to coronavirus and the impact on the mental health of people in our communities. So it's really important, of course, Joel mentioned this already, that we're taking care of ourselves, because we can't be good leaders if we're not making sure that we're okay so that we can help others be okay as well. So it kind of like similar to when you're putting on the oxygen mask on the plane, they tell you put it on yourself first, because we want to make sure that we can function appropriately and be able to guide everyone. So I put together a few tips on things that we need to make sure we're doing when we're taking care of ourselves. And self-care is kind of the topic. It's the thing we hear all the time, right? Self-care. And what does that mean exactly? It means a lot of different things to different people. You have to figure out what works for you. We have a list of things here that are definitely helpful for most people. So if you don't know what to do to take care of yourself, these are some good ideas. So I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where all of a sudden you kind of snap at someone, or you're feeling grumpy and you're getting a little agitated, and you respond or react in a way that you wish you hadn't. A lot of times there are things that are happening inside your body where there's a buildup of stress and anxiety that's just from like going through your day. Right now, a lot of people are feeling that more than ever because of all the anxieties and uncertainties. So it's important that throughout our day that we're relaxing our body often, that we're taking the time to just kind of take care of ourselves, check in with ourselves, and see what's happening, because we may not notice that buildup happening. You might think, oh, I handle stress great, I don't really deal with anxiety a lot, but it can sneak up on you if you're not taking care of yourself in a regular way. So just taking deep breaths, stretching your body. Some people really like to meditate or pray, or sometimes just engaging in activities that you enjoy, that isn't work, that isn't, you know, your drive and motivation that you usually have every day. It's really just taking the time away to let yourself kind of sit and be still and relax and get back on track. Of course, sleep hygiene is super important. I've heard from a lot of leaders right now that they're having trouble sleeping. There's a lot on their mind. So this is really important, ways that we can make sure we're keeping a regular sleep routine, even though a lot of us are working from home or we're having different schedules because of changes in our work life. We have to maintain a regular sleep routine. We need to move our bodies. Like, our bodies are made for moving. Walking can be a simple way to move our bodies. So getting some exercise, this is always suggested for good mental health. Eating healthy foods, right? A lot of us might be eating more comfort foods right now because we might be stressed or overwhelmed, but making sure that we're taking care of the nutrition that we need. So those are always recommendations for taking care of ourselves. Also, we may be dealing with like having to make decisions quickly, doing things that can be stressful when like for me, I know that my staff gets stressed a lot when we're trying to make a lot of changes, trying to accommodate the different things that have been going on. We have to pace ourselves between those stressful activities. If you're just overloaded with stressful activities all the time, you're not going to be able to make it. You're going to burn out. So we have to kind of take some breaks from those things. We have to educate ourselves and know what's going on, be up to date on the information that's out there about COVID-19 and what the experts say, but we also need to take breaks from the news and from social media. That can start to get really overwhelming after a while, just constantly hearing a barrage, especially of negative information, which tends to be on the news a lot. So we need to really make sure that we're taking those breaks. We're getting the information we need to be able to be leaders and be successful in guiding our staff through these things, but we also need to take some breaks from it. And then talking about what you're going through. What have your experiences been? What are you feeling with your loved ones or friends? I think leaders sometimes feel like it's all on their shoulders and we have to carry everyone through this, but we can't do it alone. We have to have the support of others. We have to be able to reach out to others and talk to people about what we're going through and kind of let that out a little bit. It's not all on us. So we can connect through telephone and video technology. I've seen people getting really creative and going into parking lots and tailgating kind of like get-togethers and things like that. So just continuing to try to feel that connection with other people we care about is really helpful to take care of ourselves. And then trying to find that positive thinking and that sense of hope in what's happening. There's a lot of things that are very stressful and a lot of things that feel like it's just draining and overwhelming on us. But in a lot of ways, there's things that are happening that are also very positive. One of the biggest things that occurs whenever we have a major change, like I work in crisis, so we see this a lot. People have a crisis or a major change in their life, and a lot of times it opens doors to other opportunities, to changes that we might make that are actually for the better. So we want to try to keep a mindset like that, that although things may be challenging, there's also these opportunities and positive ways that we can look at some things. So trying to maintain that mindset is really important. So taking care of ourselves, if we can't do that, it's really hard for us to maintain what we need to maintain to lead everyone else. So I wanted to talk a little bit about resiliency and the way that some people have natural resilient traits that lead to better mental health, that lead to them being more successful. But resiliency is something that can be built. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that and the strategies that we can take to take care of ourselves better and have better mental health. So if you look here, I just mentioned what the definition of resiliency is. So psychological resiliency, this is, when you think about resiliency, a lot of people think about flexibility, bouncing back, overcoming adversity, those kinds of things. So it is our ability to bounce back from negative emotional experiences and by flexible adaptation to the changing demands of stressful experiences. So having that ability to go through something that's hard, that feels really overwhelming and maybe really negative, but also be able to bounce back from that and overcome it and cope and go through it and then come back from it. And then we're adapting, we're being flexible, we're figuring out how we get through a really stressful experience, even though it may feel like things are changing all the time. So some of the variables and like traits and characteristics that people who are very resilient have, one is biology. We can't change that, right? That's the heritability, that's the genes that we get that help us respond to stress in certain ways. Some people are much more flexible and easygoing than others. Some people get really stressed and feel that change in their body, that physiology that intensifies when they're under stress. So some of that is nothing we can change. If you have those traits, that's already great, but we can build on these other areas as well. Having psychosocial traits like self-awareness, so being able to actually take a step back and check in with yourself. What am I feeling? What's going on in my body right now? Am I feeling my heartbeat race? Am I getting sweaty? Am I clenching up? My face is burning. You start to notice those things that are happening inside yourself when you're feeling overwhelmed or you're feeling stressed or anxious. And being able to check in and have that self-awareness allows you to know now how I can make a change, what I can do differently to cope with that and affect that in a positive way. Self-regulation is another trait that contributes to resiliency. So when our fight or flight responses get really revved up, so these fight or flight responses are natural for everyone. You might have heard that if you've ever heard of like trauma reactions. People will either like run away or they might fight, and sometimes they avoid. They might just protect themselves. But we all have these kinds of responses in really stressful situations. And we might start to notice it through our self-awareness, and we can start to regulate it. There's things we can do to change our thoughts, to impact our emotions, and change our physiology. Deep breathing, like I already mentioned in the self-care, is one of the things we use to change our physiology. You can't take deep breaths and stay like super angry or overwhelmed. It actually brings down the physiology to help you start to feel a little more regulated. So, you know, in my work in crisis, we do a lot of work around self-regulation, co-regulation, how parents can help regulate their children together with them. So those are like coping skills and trying to work through this like really intensified anxiety or anger or whatever feelings that are kind of engaging that response. Another variable is mental agility. So this is our ability to look at a problem and see it in different ways, that we may have multiple perspectives on the problem. We can analyze it and find ways to solve it, sometimes being very creative in those ways. We're not stuck in a, you know, rigid kind of way of thinking. We're thinking in a way that is very agile. So having the ability to do that contributes to resiliency because it helps us bounce back. It helps us remain flexible in the way that we're looking at things. Optimism. Now, I know a lot of people will say, oh, I'm a realist, or I'm actually a little bit pessimistic, but we can actually build optimism as well. You don't have to like see the world through rose-colored glasses to be optimistic. This is really just the belief in a positive future. That we can look at a situation and say, there's some things in this situation that I can change and maybe I can have some control over, but there's other things that I know I can't. And they may just be things I have to accept, that this is the way it is. And, you know, when we get really bogged down in the things that we can't change and aren't looking at ways to find how can I accept this and kind of move beyond this, then that can impact our ability to remain resilient, and it leads to depression, it leads to anxiety. So if we have this attitude that we probably can see a positive future, there are ways we can look at this and kind of know what I can change and know what I can affect, and I can continue to persist. I know that I can continue to work on this and move forward. And then self-efficacy, that's the ability to know and use your character strengths. So some of that kind of leads from self-awareness as well. Like I can look at myself and I can say, well, this is what I'm really good at. And maybe there's some other things that I'm not as great at, and that's okay too, but I'm going to use these strengths that I have. I'm going to understand who I am at my best, and I know that I can affect change. I can make a difference. I can take these skills and these strengths that I have and use them to the best of my ability. And then another one is connection. So everybody's had different experiences in their lives with attachment figures. So these would be people that maybe raised us or relationships we've had over our lifetime. So having secure attachments is really helpful in resiliency, but you may not have had great relationships at some points. Having at least one person in your life that you know that you can rely on and that you can turn to when things are hard helps you remain resilient. So you feel connected to a person or a group of people. You may also feel connected to faith or nature or some purpose, something larger than yourself. So feeling purpose-driven and feeling like there's something that you're here for, there's a bigger picture beyond yourself, actually helps us remain more resilient. So gives us that mindset of like being able to get through hard things. So this is a strategy, this came out of the University of Pennsylvania, where they have a whole department on positive psychology. And they've created this kind of strategy of what we can do right in the moment when we're feeling like negative thoughts are overtaking us. We're getting bogged down in anxiety. We're not sure of ourselves. We're not sure what to do to move forward. So this idea of like, what can I do? Real-time resiliency to change my mindset, to bring myself down, calm myself down, reassure myself so that then I can move forward and be successful with what I'm trying to do. So we're going to challenge some of these thoughts that are kind of taking over, and they're making it hard for us to respond to maybe an adverse situation. So example might be, I might say like, the situation I'm dealing with is just so overwhelming that I don't think that I can do anything about it. There's nothing I can do. I'm just going to have to live with this terrible thing. So we're going to look at different ways to break it down. And there's 3 steps. One's evidence, one's reframe, and one's plan. You could use them all together or just one single part of it. So the evidence is, this is you trying to collect data in a way, like a researcher, to prove to yourself that the thought you're having is not true. So you would start with like maybe a simple statement, that's not true because. So you start thinking about the evidence, why that specific thing isn't true. And you want to make it very vivid, a very vivid image of what that data is, because then that data, in the very vivid way that you're thinking about it, starts to crowd out any of those other situations that are coming into your mind that are starting to be very negative. So the data starts to say, no, that's not true because I've been able to do this in the past. This is one way that I've been successful in this similar situation. I know that I have the skills to be able to get through this. So that's actually not true. So telling yourself that starts to change that negative thought in a way. Reframing is a great way. When I do work in crisis, we reframe situations all the time. We think about a situation that a family might be dealing with, and we try to frame it in a different way that doesn't sound the same way as it maybe originally did. So it's like my child is like talking back a lot, or they're being very defiant. They know what they want to do and they just can't listen to me when I'm trying to help them. And it's like, one reframe on that is, well, your child knows themselves very well, right? They know themselves very well and they're pushing really hard for what they think they want, right? And you as a parent are guiding them, right? So reframing it a little bit is like, not that they're defiant or trying to disobey you, but they have like a strong sense of who they are. So this is the positive thing. So we're going to use that and help, like, how can we use this positive thing about them to help them also do what you need them to do to be successful. So we're restructuring these unhelpful thoughts that put us in a place where we're like, we're going to fail, we can't do this, and we're going to think about it in a more useful way. So you might just say to yourself, a better way to see this is, so what's a different way we can look at the same situation, and we're practicing some of that mental agility so we can feel really like, you know what, this is something I can take on. It doesn't feel so negative. It doesn't feel so overwhelming. And then the plan is really just making a contingency plan. So when our catastrophic thinking, which a lot of us do, we'll say, I could never do that, or I'm always going to fail at this because I don't have, you know, the skills to do X, Y, or Z. So if we're starting to think that way and we're feeling that anxiety that always comes when those catastrophic thinking kind of traps take over in our mind, we can't perform our best when that's happening. So we're going to start thinking, well, if this happens, this is what I'm going to do. So we're creating a plan for ourselves. And this one is a really good one to use when you're going into a situation when you maybe feel a little anxious or maybe feel like you're not right where you want to be. So for example, like a job interview, a lot of people will use this. Like, so if they ask me something that I don't know, I'm just going to feel like I failed the job interview. That might be a catastrophic thought that you're having. But you could say, if X happens, if I am not able to answer the question, I will let them know that I know how to get the information and I'm going to get back to them with that information. So it's like, what kind of contingency plan can you put in place to make you feel less anxious, feel like you're more in control of the situation? You don't have to have all the answers, but you are better prepared for dealing with those anxious situations that might be coming up. All right, so I'm going to switch a little bit away from kind of building our own mental health to thinking about how we can lead people who are going through the same things that we're going through with coronavirus. And I found this 2019 Edelman Trust Barometer, which looks to see how much trust the public has in different institutions. And in what they found was that at that time, and it seems to be consistently occurring now, is that the public trust in employers is actually at an all-time high. So people are trusting their employers more than they're trusting the government or other, you know, institutions, public institutions. 75% of people actually reported having trust in business leaders, and 71% of employees believe that it's critically important for leaders to respond to challenging times. So it's important for us to know this, because we know that people have a lot of trust in what we're doing right now as leaders, but they also believe we need to respond, right, to something that's challenging. So COVID-19 is a perfect example of something we need to make sure that we're responding to. So if we're thinking about how do we do that, you know, how do we stay resilient ourselves and help move people through this and keep themselves together as well? Well, there's quite a few things we can do. One, we're setting the tone as leaders. So remaining calm, taking a methodical approach to what happens next is really important. So people are looking to us as leaders to guide them through this. So of course, we're still going to worry about things, and we still need to vent. We need to do that in private. We need to show people that we have a plan, right? So we've thought through this. We've figured out how we're going to proceed. We're going to take a decisive action to move forward, and we're going to remain calm and help people feel okay moving forward. We're also going to provide them with accurate and up-to-date information. So they're really looking to leaders to guide them on what they should be paying attention to. So there's a ton of information out there. Some of it's really conflicting. As leaders, we're looking at the information that's coming from experts. There's still a lot that we don't know, and we're going to be transparent about that. There's some things that we can't answer, but there's a lot of things we're doing to make sure that we're guiding them on the right path of being successful in our business. So we're painting a picture of the future, and we're helping them see that we can persevere. And we're hoping that the information that we're providing, the way that we're guiding, is inspiring others to kind of persevere through this. And for me, as a crisis manager, this has been something that's been really challenging. We We usually go into people's homes. We work with kids in the community. We go to wherever they are. And there's a lot of fear, from staff about, well, will I be exposed to coronavirus, or will I be able to help people over telehealth as we transition to more telehealth? And, what might happen if I can't help someone, and how can I do this? And the great thing is we can use the creative ideas of others as we collect information about how to move forward in the best way. So sometimes we have ideas and we have answers. We're being transparent when we don't, but we're also able to kind of frame things for our staff and the people we're leading to, this is what I see as the way we can move forward. And because there's so much uncertainty, people are feeling that. They're feeling overwhelmed. They're feeling like, I don't know what's going to happen to me. So, and that amount of uncertainty leads people to feel anxiety. It impacts their mental health. It makes them unfocused. It feels like they can't do their best sometimes because they're on edge. So they might need support. Some aren't experiencing that. So it's like kind of checking in with our staff. Who is having a hard time? And we need to be thinking about parents, especially right now that we're leading, because parents are dealing with, how do I take care of my children? How do I make sure my children are being educated? How do I also work during all of this of, keeping everybody on track in my family? And there really has been a radical shift in business from most employees are driven, are focused on their work, that's their priority. But right now there is a big radical shift from really maintaining consistent focus on your work to, I need to take care of my family. I need to make sure my family is safe and healthy, and I need to figure out what I'm doing about schools or daycare closures. And in general, people are just feeling kind of angst. There's this feeling that, people are dying, and there's a situation out there that could be life-threatening, and I don't know what that means, and I don't know what's going to happen with it. So because people are having so much anxiety and feelings about that, we have to acknowledge it, and we have to be able to manage it. And some of that is recognizing that it's happening, helping people find solutions to some of those things, and being aware of how it is really impacting them, so we can help them be successful in moving forward in their work as well. So one thing we can do is check in with people one-on-one. So how are people really doing, and how can we help? People do feel connected to leaders who express empathy. So the fact that you are able to really put yourself in their shoes and understand what it might be like to be trying to do the work that they're doing while also managing their family and the anxieties that are coming along with all the uncertainty and changes. We might not even be really fixing anything, but just listening and understanding and really expressing empathy for what they're going through can make a huge difference. People want to follow leaders and go above and beyond sometimes for leaders who really seem to hear them and get them and understand what's going on for them. So it's also, I mentioned this a little bit already, but it's also a great opportunity to empower others to be creative. As leaders, we do feel like we're carrying, the responsibility of pulling everybody through and figuring out solutions. But we have so much talent on our teams that we can tap into when we're trying to figure things out. So exploring with our staff and the people that we work with, what are some other ideas they have? I know that I've had staff that have come up with wonderful ideas, creative ideas that have really been something we've implemented that's moved forward in a really successful way and helped us in this time when things are changing and uncertain. And also collaborating with peers. So at Delaware Guidance, we've had opportunities to actually collaborate with other organizations and see how are they doing things. And some of our leadership has been able to share some ideas that we've had with other organizations. So it's a great opportunity for us to collaborate together, which I don't know that we always do a great job at, especially in the state of Delaware, really collaborating across organizations and groups. How are we going to learn from each other and lean on each other so that we can kind of figure out the best path forward? This is a great opportunity for us to do that and build relationships that moving past this might actually be very useful. of course, we're continuing to take time for ourselves. So we're thinking about doing a lot of things here to take care of others, like checking in one-on-one. That I know I do one-on-ones a lot with my staff, and it takes up a lot of my time. I've gotten down to like 10 or 15-minute check-ins just to see, how everybody's doing, because it's so much time. So we have to make sure we take a step back and check in with ourselves again. How are we doing? What are we doing to take care of ourselves? And as we're continuing to move forward, continuing to take care of ourselves so we can take care of others. And then really finally, just, you might make some mistakes, and that's really okay. There's no definite answers in all of this. So we want to acknowledge them, let people know, like, maybe this didn't work as well as we hoped, and we're going to try something different. Put some takeaway messages here from everything I put together, and I think I talked a little bit longer than I expected. So I wanted to turn it over to all of you, and I think we're going to take some questions.
Thank you. And thank you again. Excellent presentation and really good content. And also, it's always great when there's some things that we can use live in our everyday attempt to lead. So looks like, Matt, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Joel. Thank you very much for the comments. It was good to hear things that have been implemented or that I've been working on, and so it's reinforcing what I've been doing, but also hearing some tips that I haven't heard, so thank you. You spoke about mental agility with resiliency, and I really think that's going to be key as far as what I'm envisioning, this bounce back and forth between in-person and virtual, opening and closing, like all of this that can potentially be happening. So I was wondering, could you provide maybe some suggestions for developing mental agility in others? So if there's any techniques for leaders or way that we can implement this as we're in meetings, it's a one-on-one or a team meeting or team building. I think that's going to be such an important skill, but I don't think it's something that we can just, in a lot of times in meetings, say, okay, let's work on our mental agility, people. Ways that we can, what are ways that we can do that?
So that's a great question, because I think that there are some people who are just much more flexible and agile in the way that they think about things. So, it's great when people that have that natural ability can help those that don't. Like in my work, I have staff, like crisis clinicians need to be very mentally agile because they have to think quickly, they have to be flexible, they have to consider situations from different perspectives, they have to really take a step back. So I think that as you're building mental agility in people and you're helping your staff figure out ways to be more flexible in their thinking, that it's practice. So it's having some self-awareness, so taking a step back and like, am I feeling really rigid right now? Am I feeling like, because I know even sometimes there'll be situations where someone will say, oh, I want you to do this, and my first reaction is, oh, no, I'm not going to do that. Like I might feel a rebellious streak or something, like, no, I do it the right way. I feel okay with what I'm doing. But if you're able to take a step back from that and go, oh, I'm kind of being a little bit stuck on one thing. I'm being a little rigid. I need to think about this from some different perspectives. So it might be even like weighing out the pros and cons. You talk about that when you're making decisions about different things. It's practice. It helps you practice looking at things from different perspectives, looking at different possible solutions. So, with kids, I work on problem solving skills. So this is another way that actually adults can work on mental agility as well. It's like take a situation and break it down. What's happening in the situation? What are the positive things that we should look at? If I'm a leader, how would my staff look at this problem differently? I want to start trying to think from their perspective. And then when I'm working with staff, I want them to start kind of looking at it that way, because I think we get really fast in the way that we're moving forward, and we don't take the time to take a step back from it and think about it from different perspectives. So I think that's the best way to build mental agility, is really have awareness, take a step back and check in with yourself to see how you're thinking about things, and then start to practice different ways of looking at things in a flexible way. And also just kind of recognizing that there's lots of great ways to do things. We have to be, you know, open to those options, those possibilities.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Just remember, if you have any questions, just type the word "I have a question." Looks like we have a question from Leanne Myers.
Okay.
Hi, Leanne Myers. Thanks so much.
Hi.
So one of the things that I've been struggling with is change fatigue. So with COVID and the pandemic, there have been many, many changes in infection prevention, and they're happening kind of fast and furious.
Yes.
How do we help our teams build that resiliency and continue to trust us while I'm saying one thing on Monday and then on Friday it might be a different message?
Yes, that's a great question, because we're experiencing that in my work as well. You know, where and some of that is very similar. Like, so change fatigue is like, I'm just so tired of having to do something a different way, or trying. I've actually even seen memes about this, of people like going like, oh, here's me trying to, you know, tell my staff about all the changes that have happened in just since lunch. So it is kind of like checking in with the staff to see how they're doing with it. I know my staff have stopped reading emails a little bit, so I have to go back and check in with them and say, I know you're getting a lot of emails. I know there's a lot of things that are being put in place and changing. Sometimes I also have to summarize those things for them. And I think it's great when you can talk to people in person or over video. So instead of just reading emails all the time or whatever, that they're actually hearing from you. I think it's also coming at it in kind of the way you're already saying, in an empathetic way. Like, I know that this is a lot. I know that I'm asking you to change a lot of things. We've gone from, we just started this and now we're going to do something different. But if you can keep in mind that sometimes we're going to try things because we just don't know what's going to work best. Nobody's ever been through this in our lifetime, that we've had to, you know, make these changes or kind of put so much in place. So if you can bear with me when I have to change things. But so it's like expressing kind of a genuine authenticity about what you're experiencing, having to make these changes, but also being open to hearing from them about what it's like for them when they are going through this. I think that helps them just be able to manage it better. You know, just knowing that, you know, it's hard on them can really be helpful to help them move through it, because we have to keep doing this. We have to keep changing things. We have to keep trying to figure out what is best in this situation. So I think that what you're doing already is probably, you know, of course, if we can stop changing things every once in a while and give people a break, that's helpful, but that's probably not going to happen. So it sounds like you're doing a great job already.
Yeah, great job. Great question there. Actually, I have a question.
Okay.
If you have an employee that may be suffering from mental health issues, or maybe you can tell they're struggling, how do you approach them and still remain professional and not cross the line?
Yeah, that can be a challenge. And I know for me, because I work in mental health and I am a therapist, sometimes I have to be really aware of the fact that I don't want to become a therapist with my staff, right? Because I'm in a different role than that. So it's like, one, we have to think about, there are some things to consider in terms of businesses and what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. So we don't want to be asking too much detail about people's personal lives or things that we shouldn't, in terms of like what our HR department would say. We don't want to go into too much detail about you know, those kinds of personal things that maybe they don't want to share with a boss, or maybe a boss shouldn't know. But it's like, it's okay to reach out to your staff and say, I'm a little worried about you. It feels like you're struggling or you're having a hard time, and I want to be able to help. So I think that just checking in because you notice that things are happening, and you don't have to emphasize anything about their mental health or going into like too much personal information. But I think that, because I've seen staff whose performance has started to be challenging, because I'm sure that they're dealing with some mental health impacts. And if I just go and say, you're not turning in your paperwork, you're not doing this, like your performance is, you know, a mess and you need to do better, they're not going to do better, right? Because they are struggling. But if I go to them and I say, I really want to check in on you because I think you're having a hard time and I want to figure out how I can help, we might be able to problem solve together and work through it. So we're still maintaining that professional boundary. We can also encourage them to reach out to resources. Like if you're really having a hard time, like our company has an EAP, you know, you could touch base with them if you feel like you need someone to talk to, you know, because we're all needing someone to talk to right now from time to time. So I think, like, you know, providing the resources, expressing in an empathetic way that I see that you're having a hard time and I want to be able to help, you know, because at some point you are going to have to hold a staff person responsible for performance issues. But if you come from a place of, I can see that you're struggling and I want to help you succeed, a lot of times staff are like, I want to do a better job. I want to figure out what I need to do to be successful. And they're more willing to take those steps. And then ultimately their performance improves.
Thank you. It looks like we have Dave Sweeney that has a question. Dave?
Okay.
Thank you very much for your time. Dave Sweeney here with Advantech. So actually this will segue relatively nicely off of Joel's question. So as everyone starts to reevaluate bringing folks back and starting to define some semblance of business pre-COVID, I think we're all going to be left dealing with a handful of team members that say, I'm not comfortable coming back.
Yes.
And in reality, we're going to be left to manage and deal with that situation with very little historical kind of evidence or very little this is what we did last time, so to speak. So what's your advice, or what do you think's going to happen as business leaders have to deal with employees that say, I'm not comfortable coming back?
Yeah. So that's a great question, because that's something that we've already, in my organization, have dealt with already, because we have some staff that are required to work in the office because we need them to be there. Their work can't be done from home. And, you know, there's people who have experienced like these feelings like, I'm not safe, I can't be in the office, and then they're not there, and it puts people in a bad situation who are, you know, their team. So I think there's a few things that impact that. Like, there are right now some federal legislation that's protecting employees, right? So this Families First Leave Act allows people who don't have daycare and don't have or are sick or are taking care of someone who's sick to have something similar to an FMLA that's paid. You know, so that's one of the areas that we've struggled with as an organization, just to kind of figure that out. So I think that's a great thing to be thinking about now, because if those kinds of like federal mandates remain, there's going to be a possibility that staff will be protected to not come back, that's part of, you know, if it's falling in under these guidelines. And then, so what we've had to do is really make a plan for how we're going to accommodate our business to be able to still function even if some of our staff aren't back. And then other things that we've been thinking about is, how do we help people feel more comfortable and safer to come back? Because there's sometimes it's out of fear and sometimes it's out of necessity. Like if you have a 2-year-old at home and no one to take care of them, then that can be a challenge. So maybe thinking through what are some of the problems that might come up that would prevent people from being able to come back, and what are some things we can put in place now as in our planning phases of reopening that will help ease that some. And then also, what's our contingency plan to make sure that we have some way to continue our business forward even if all of our staff don't come back. So I don't think there's an easy answer to that question, but I think like in a planning, in a really intentional way, thinking through what might impact, because you're right, we don't have any real guidance, but we do know that these are some things that are going to prevent people from coming back. We do know that there's some things that maybe we can strategize to help them feel comfortable coming back. And then when there isn't anything we can do to bring them back, how do we make sure our business can still move forward with the people we do have coming back?
Thank you.
We have another question from Shantae Hastings. Shantae, you're on.
Afternoon, Malia. Thank you so much for taking the time out to be with us. A follow-up question to Dave's question, kind of the flip side of it is, I have been in the office working, and I have about 200 staff that have been telecommuting and another 200 that have had to be in the office. And so my anxiety is having those 200 people come back and all of the chaos that it's going to create in terms of, so-and-so wearing a face covering and this person wasn't, and I don't feel safe, and all of these things. And I'm trying to reduce my anxiety because I do want to get back to whatever normal may look like. But I just see the stressors similar to the first couple of weeks when it hit, as I was trying to get people out of the office. Now it's going to be stressful getting them back in the office. So any thoughts or advice for that?
Yeah, so those are some things we've been thinking about too at Delaware Guidance, because we have a lot of staff that are telecommuting. So we're looking at it from the phase plan, like similar to what the governor's doing. So our phase one, they're saying 30% of staff, can be back in the building and start. So we're meeting with staff, we're meeting with leaders. We're thinking about how can we best utilize our space so that social distancing can be maintained and that people feel comfortable. How can we best, have people sign up for spaces? We're thinking about, what are the practices we want to continue to reiterate. And I think something that we've seen is we need to have somebody that's in a position of monitoring some of those things, because, you have different staff who feel different ways about all of this. Some people don't feel comfortable wearing masks. Some people are really freaking out when other people aren't wearing masks. So how do we monitor it to the point where we can make sure everybody's aware and doing what we expect? And then the other thing that we've been doing is some town halls with different types of staff. So we have community-based staff, and we have in-office staff, and we have support staff. Some are clinicians, some are, support. So we're doing some town halls with all of those staff. So, you can get a perspective from the actual people who are doing the work. What is this like for them? How's it going for them? And then I think the important part that's helpful about that is other people are also hearing what their coworkers are feeling and experiencing. So it's not just like somebody coming to leadership and saying, this person's not doing what they're supposed to do. I feel anxious about this, because we all feel anxiety about this. We want everybody to feel as safe and comfortable. So I think putting together a plan saying, this is specifically what we're doing to keep everybody safe. This is our plan for bringing you all back in a not chaotic way. So that takes a little bit of thinking through, how do we bring people back so it doesn't feel like chaos? And then making a plan for people to be able to continue to talk about how they're feeling. We've also, we're a therapy agency, so we've also been doing some critical incident stress debriefing with all of our staff who want to come. So it's we see this as a traumatic incident for some people, and we know that they might need some debriefing on how they are experiencing all that. So we've been making available some meetings that people can come to talk through the anxieties they're feeling, the challenges that they're going through. So we're giving people different kinds of opportunities to talk about their actual feelings about everything, but also, how is the change impacting you? What about our business practices should we be thinking about? And I think that is really helping our leadership to make more informed, better decisions that impact our staff in more positive ways. So I don't know if that gives you some ideas about how to maybe move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Malia, I have one question. So as COVID has been, kind of running rampant, there has been support that's been put in place. The Family First Corona Response Act being one. How would you say you should respond if you feel like someone's taken advantage of that?
Yeah. So that's been one of the stressors, I think, for some of our staff, when they feel that, I've had staff come to me who say, all of these things are private. We're not sharing what staff are doing, or that they're taking advantage of some of these things that are available to them. But staff talk to each other, so they hear about things. And, one example is we had a staff who reported that her daycare closed and she was going to utilize this, being paid while at home for this extended period of time that she has no daycare. But then other staff are feeling angry about that because they're saying, well, yeah, she has a younger child in daycare, but she also has a 16-year-old who could take care of that child. And she's now leaving us with extra work, and extra things that we have to do. So I think what we have to do is make sure that, staff are aware of what's available to them, but also aware of how it will impact everyone and what we're going to do. Sorry about that. What we're going to do to make sure that we're taking care of everyone. And then for staff who, because I think what's going to happen is people know those things because they're talking to each other. So we want to make sure that they're feeling like they're not going to be overwhelmed with too much. How are we going to support the staff that are still there? So we put some things in place too, like there's requirements for all of those federal legislation. So they have to meet all those requirements. They have to submit proof, that they don't have daycare or they don't have an ability to come into work because they're sick, or they have a family member they're taking care of that's sick. So we're putting those things in place, and then also thinking about how to take care of the staff that are left to do probably extra work because this person now isn't going to be able to work. And we have to support those staff because they do start to feel like, well, I wish I could just say, I don't have daycare and I can stay home and be paid and not be actually working. So those are challenges that I think we all have to be thinking about and kind of coming up with ways that we can support people, but also, know that this is available to some staff if they meet the right criteria and they're turning in that right information.
Thank you. And so if you were to, it's going to sound very Leadership Delaware-like, if you were to give any closing remarks or closing guidance in 2 minutes, what would you say to the team and those listening?
I think I would just say that, this has been really crazy for a lot of people, that this has led to a lot of uncertainty, led to a lot of anxiety. There are people that are struggling, but a reframe is that there have been a lot of great things that have come out of this. Just like in any crisis or tragedy, there are usually these positive things that are popping up in the midst of it. We see greatness in people. We see the wonderful aspects of what people are able to bring to our teams. We start to see the creativity that people show, the commitment that they show. And I think we need to hold on to those really positive things that helps us get through when things are challenging, to be able to see, all of these other positive things that are going on. Like I've had the opportunity to start developing things within my program because I have, extra time, to kind of think about things in a different way where everybody's not running and crazy and with the way we normally are in crisis. We can think about maybe a better way to do what we've always been doing. So it's given me an opportunity to be creative and think outside the box of what we normally do and think about a new way that might be even better. So there's really a lot going on that can impact our mental health and really challenge us. But if we really think about some of the positive things that come out of it and reframe the negativity to something that maybe we can grow from this, and having a growth mindset around the challenges, I think that we'll all come out of this even stronger.
Thank you. Thank you for those supporting words, and thank you for the presentation. I guess I'll speak on behalf of Leadership Delaware. We really appreciate you sharing your knowledge and helping us as we learn to lead our teams. Also, I guess from a personal note, I've never been more proud of Delaware Guidance Service. I guess I should have did a disclaimer in the beginning that I am the vice chair of the board for Delaware Guidance Services, and you represent that organization absolutely well. And I want to thank you personally and for our board.
Thank you.
So, thank you. So before everyone takes off, I want to